Supervisors. We will open with an invocation by Mrs. Kupka and the Pledge of Allegiance by Mr. Miller. Please rise.
Dear Lord, thank you for bringing us together here today to conduct the business of our community. We thank you for all the blessings you have bestowed upon us, and we ask that you continue to bestow upon us the blessings of wisdom and strength and discernment in the decisions we need to make this evening. In your name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Mrs. Kupka. Thank you, Mr. Miller. We will now move on to amendments to the agenda. Mr. Miller, do we have any amendments?
I believe we have the need for closed session, and I believe Ms. Lackey had a need for a closed session as well.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion to amend the agenda.
So move.
Second.
All right, we have a motion properly second. Do we have any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
The opposed chair votes aye. Motion carries. All right. We will move on to public comment. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person in order to afford everyone an opportunity to speak. If comments relate to a specific public hearing item, we ask that you offer those comments at the time of the public hearing. When you do come up, please state your name and your address, and we will open the floor now.
Good evening. I'm Matthew Rolls, live in Claydale. I'm here primarily as a King George resident, though I do sit on another board in the county. But I'm not here representing the school board. It's just my views and comments. So first of all, thank you so much for what you do. I know it's a lot of work and time to come here and serve the community. I really appreciate that. So that said, I do have a confession to make. Until quite recently, I was quite blissfully ignorant of how county governance have worked. So we're trying to turn over a new leaf and be more involved in what's going on. I did go to try to find the budget working group minutes from May when you all voted to approve a proposed budget, since that obviously impacts quite a bit what the schools do, and was disappointed to find that I could not find that, and that actually there were not minutes posted for any of the work sessions. And so I think it's tremendously important that we do everything we can to involve the public as much as possible so they can contribute to what's going on here. And when it's too difficult to find things like the minutes or expensive, it inhibits that full participation that I think is going to benefit the county from having a fully informed and engaged electorate. So yeah, and also on that point, again, I thank you for what you do. And I just think it's true that 5 people, whether it's the school board, the board of supervisors, simply can't bring all the talents and wisdom to bear that the entire community can, and when given the tools to review and come and contribute in that way. And so I guess also later in the agenda today, see how I'm doing my time, we're going to talk about the fees. So that's another thing that can inhibit people from getting the information they need to fully participate. So I hope make sure those aren't cost prohibitive for folks. And I guess more on the point, investigating, I did get really good help from Mr. Miller's executive assistant, so I appreciate for that, for getting the transcript for the minutes for that meeting once I asked for them. But I did have to ask for them, and I was told that they're not posted because they don't get approved, and FOIA only requires the minutes get posted 7 days after they're approved. So that certainly seems like quite a loophole to not approve the minutes, and then you don't have to post them. And it's not technically a FOIA violation, but it's against the spirit of FOIA, obviously, to not be providing that transparency. So I'd encourage you to look at that and try to improve in that area. Thank you very much.
Todd Fairfax, 623 Kings Highway. Good evening, Mr. Chair. This weekend, I downloaded and reviewed the agenda packet for tonight's meeting. I want to bring to your attention a matter related to the packet content. The consent agenda, the county attorney's report, the opioid harm reduction presentation, All the action items and the discussion items have their respective material included as part of the packet PDF file. In contrast, the Defense Production Zone and Technology Zone ordinance presentation was not included in the PDF, and as of the close of business today, is still not included in the packet. There's no way you can take forward action on this presentation tonight if you haven't had that presentation for even 24 hours. A complete agenda packet should be uploaded to the county website sufficiently in advance of any public meeting so that the public can review the content and prepare public comment or engage their supervisors as appropriate. Tonight's agenda packet is not the first time that material presented to the board during a public meeting has not been included in the packet. I've seen this happen a few times before. Shouldn't the public be able to speak in an informed way on any matter in the agenda packet during the meeting's public comment, so that board members or presenters are able to address the public's questions, comments, or concerns voiced during public comment? The principle of honest, responsible, and transparent government requires timely access by the public to all public matters before the governing bodies. Please consider imposing a requirement on staff that any agenda items that include presentation content must be included in the agenda packet, or the agenda item must be postponed to a later date until such content is included in the packet. In fact, the bylaws adopted on January 3rd, 2023 require that board packets contain all required information for each meeting, be furnished to all members by the clerk at least 6 days prior to each meeting, and a copy of the agenda and the packet be made available for review by the public prior to any meeting and be posted on the county website. Finally, when can the public expect to see the final bylaws that were adopted on January 3rd, 2023, posted to the Board of Supervisors webpage? As of now, only the proposed red line version exists in the agenda packet for the January 3rd meeting. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, board members. My name is Renee Parker. I live at 7144 Peppermill Road in King George. Just here tonight to thank you for doing the hard thing, and to ask you to keep doing the hard thing. And I'm talking about the tax hike. I'm probably in the minority of those at public comment regarding the tax hike. And I know many of you have lived here long enough to remember past boards who said things like, you did fine with last year's money, you'll do fine this year to the schools. And year after year after year, that's what they said. You did fine last year, you'll do fine this year. So this is not necessarily a comment about the schools, although they occupy so much of your budget, they are the bullseye typically when people are complaining about the budget. With regard to property tax, many people think that the more people that move here, the less you should worry about raising the taxes because the people that move here will pay those taxes. They don't realize that the tiny amount of money that they're paying in property taxes accounts for a very small fraction of the infrastructure that they end up incurring the need for changes in law enforcement, changes in fire and rescue and apparatus, change in the schools, and that small amount of increased property taxes from people that move here, who move here, by the way, because the property taxes are so low, it's a catch-22. And you know that. And if you don't have significant revenue on the horizon, real significant revenue on the horizon, the only thing you can do is raise taxes. I know it's difficult. You know it's difficult. No one wants to hear it. No one wants to suffer it. Your family members, your friends, people that elected you don't want to know that you're party to raising taxes. But it is revenue, and it's the only way that you can sometimes increase the revenue, especially when your big revenue funder right now, the landfill, is completely used. All of that money that we make in the landfill is tagged for various whatever. There is no, and back in the day with other boards, they had some wiggle room. So it was easy for them to pontificate on how wonderful they were for having the lowest property taxes in the area. But for us to be a county that's number 11 in the state of Virginia for median income per capita, but to have only 31 or so counties with lower property taxes than we do is a vast disparity. And I appreciate the fact that you're looking at that and you're doing what you have to do. And this won't be the only year. So for those that say, please give us a break and don't do it every year, we'll end up doing exactly what past boards have done. And they wait thinking something will happen. And they wait thinking something will happen. Some revenue will come. And here's where we are. This is where we are now. And you are suffering from that mindset from years ago. And so are we. But you have to do what you have to do. And people that understand that appreciate it. Thank you.
Kenneth Stroud, 5405 Kings Highway. Thank you very much, ma'am, for pointing that out. California welcomes you very much because there's a much smarter way than just taxing people more, but bringing revenue into the county. And you're welcome to pay all you want into taxes, but I'm not a part of that. I'd much rather have industry pay the taxes. And I just want to go on record for saying that charging people more in real estate taxes isn't the way to fund increasing the amount of money we pay as a county. Thank you.
Kim Dodge, 6150 McCarthy Drive. Okay, the government works for the people don't work for the government. The way I see it is taxation is theft. We work hard for our money. You need to stay in budget for what you already collect and not keep increasing it. The appraisal values of our homes have gone up. It's an math equation. When you have one side go up and you're gonna also increase the other side, you're collecting a lot of money, okay? We go back to basic math, all right? We have 2 fast food restaurants. One has not opened up yet, Chick-fil-A. I've been waiting 14 years for that to open up. And we have the other one, I don't know what it's called because I don't eat it, but the other one that opened up. We should not compare ourselves to other counties, okay? And people don't necessarily move here. It is wonderful that we move here and we have lower taxes, but they move here for many reasons, and it's not just the taxes. And I think the school board, but I could be wrong, is 50% of the budget, but I could be wrong about that. I'm about the tax raises. People have to understand there are many people on fixed incomes. So every time you raise stuff and the bills and everything else, they're getting less and less money and they are really struggling financially. Young people can't afford this. What are we leaving for the next generation or for the young people? Okay, because they're not making as much money as we did. And we need to look at what are we leaving for each generation below us. We're leaving them with debt and high taxes that they can't pay. We need to come up with other innovative ways to pay for things, or we need to stop. And we cannot compare ourselves to any of the counties around here because they are each county, especially King George County, is different. I've lived in Northern Virginia. Fredericksburg and Stafford is totally different than King George County. I do not like when people say, well, the taxes there are a lot higher and all that, especially if you're going to compare us to Northern Virginia. We're not anything like Northern Virginia. Retired people, you're affecting them too. And there's also a lot of people losing jobs, okay? So my husband used to work at the power plant across the bridge and they closed it down, I think 2 summers ago. And he has left King George County because he didn't have a job. So you better be careful about that too. I'm just saying, you got to be careful of what's going on in the economy, and we should not raise the taxes and the tax rate.
Do we have anyone else for public comment? Mr. Dines, do we have anyone online?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we have Mrs. Fairfax.
Okay. Go ahead, Ms. Fairfax.
Mrs. Fairfax, can you unmute yourself?
Well, Mr. Dines, working through that, I will ask, did anyone on the board receive any correspondence to be entered into the record? Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Debbie Fairfax, Kings Highway. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I received a copy of tonight's presentation on technology and defense zones just this afternoon, but I do have a few questions and comments regarding it. How precisely will we compare with other nearby localities? This matters in this case because we need to be competitive while not giving away more than we should, if in fact the whole point of this is to raise revenue for the county. SPOTSI offers corporations who apply and meet tech zone requirements 5 years of incentives and then the ability to reapply for another 5. That gives the county great leverage. In SPOTSI, tax rebates are offered at 100% for 2 years and then at 50% for years 3 through 5. Stafford's is 70% for 2 years, 50% for 2 years, 30% for the 5th year. It would be helpful to see a presentation covering incentives offered by other localities. It's important for us to ask, how much revenue would we be willing to give away? The presentation on economic incentive zones has several maps with various colors. There should be a legend explaining to the board and the public what those colors mean. These maps should not need a great deal of oral explanation. The public should be able to view these online before or after the meeting and come away with a good basic understanding of what is proposed to be a defense zone and what is proposed to be a tech zone. What is, for example, signified by the yellow on the first 2 maps? This presentation has several land areas that were not covered in the previous presentation on technology zones, so a greater percentage of the citizens would potentially be affected. Obviously, since this presentation was not available to anyone until today, I'm sure we all have a lot of questions, and certainly no forward action can be responsibly taken at this time. The specifics of the ordinance need to be fleshed out. I do think that looking at some ordinances such as Spotsylvania's, which is easily accessible online, is well warranted. Additionally, with respect to FOIA, I think that, as was mentioned previously by Mr. Rolls, the whole spirit of a representative democracy is the input of the public. And the Freedom of Information Act is set up so that the people can be informed citizens. If there are abuses, specific abuses, maybe we need to quantify something regarding that. If there are people that are not citizens or corporations that are abusing perhaps the spirit of it, maybe we need to look at that. But we also need to be careful not to preclude those for whom cost is an issue. You should not have to make a certain amount of money to be a participant in county or state or federal government. Thank you.
Mr. Dines, was there anyone else online for public comment?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. In that case, I will close public comment and we will move on to reports from members of the board. Mrs. Bender.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to respond first to the to the FOIA questions, we probably should be better about maybe having our work session transcribed and online. But I do want to make the public aware once again, and I tell everyone that it is available online on YouTube on King George County official content. That is the name of the channel. And you can watch all of our meetings, at least the Board of Supervisors meetings and the Service Authority going back to January of 2020. And that's King George County official content, and it is all there. But I do want to tell the public to bear with us a little bit because we have some new staff and they're making really good improvements to our website and the way we communicate, but it can't happen overnight. And they're making small improvements to try to make us more transparent to the public and improve our website capabilities. So please keep that in mind. Concerning the economic development incentive zone and in the past, things not being in our packet, I did call asking where was the information for this. So I would like us to be better about making sure our packet is not advertised online or even sent to us without every piece that's supposed to be in there being in there. It needs to be in there because people need to make informed decisions. We need to make informed decisions. I'm not ready to vote on this or anything like this because I just saw this when it was sent to me when I requested. That's not enough time to digest the information. And it's a shame to put together such a nice presentation and not being able to look at it and make decisions on it. So I would hope we could be better as a staff and make sure that it gets corrected in the future. On more of a positive note, I did participate with Mr. Collins and the staff at Fairview Beach. Myself was interviewed for, I guess you could call it a documentary from FEMA and the Virginia Department of Emergency Management, is that right? I think I VDEM, too many acronyms. And it was showing how the Fairview Beach Stabilization Project was the first in Virginia, but it was a really positive step forward of showing how you can basically save a community and its infrastructure, meaning its water sewer from erosion, and coming up with a positive way of getting federal grant money to help a community out. And we were just part of the process of the documentary. It was good to hear some of the stories I didn't even know because the process started before my time. And I learned a little bit more from Mr. Worley when he gave his speech. I stayed and listened to it, and I think it was a real positive project. I also want to thank our staff and maintenance and Mr. Chris Clark for acquiring pieces of the bridge to give to the King George Historical Society and the Dahlgren Heritage Museum. Each are going to display it in a different way. The Dahlgren Heritage Museum is actually going to display their large piece outside near the bridge where the bridge folks are going to provide them, I'm not exactly sure, but some kind of display to put near it so that people that come to the Dahlgren Heritage Museum can look out where the bridge was and see a little bit explanation of the story. And they're going to take their piece and mount it and either treat it or put it in plexiglass so that people can go outside and see it. So I thank our staff for, I know I've been harping on this for several years, but it is part of our history and it should little pieces preserved of it. I also want to point out the Dahlgren Heritage Museum will be having a forum. They've had many of these forums. It's at 5 o'clock at UMW on Thursday, and it's hearing from people that grew up on the base, and this is not military families. A long time ago, people were allowed to live on the base, and this is from some folks who lived there a long time ago. They're going to be talking about the experience and how it was different, a different time, not as much access to be able to go to Fredericksburg, wasn't as easy, and they're going to talk about the experience of actually living on the base. Some of those folks even went to James Monroe, had a choice to go to a different high school, and were bused there or were transported there. So it'll be an interesting time. If you want to come out, check it out. The other thing I attended the Ralph Bunche Alumni Association, their monthly meeting, and answered quite a few constituents' questions concerning our budget and golf carts. The Oakwood Estates is considering that in the future, so it was interesting to get some more information about that. And I will be attending on Friday. I'm back in the HB 206 about solar, where I'm going to be working on the final regulations, and my first meeting is on Friday. So as always, I'll be bringing back information back to our staff. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Bender. Mr. Collins.
Thank you and good evening, everyone. It's good to see everyone here and online. There seems to be two themes this evening, one about money, taxes, and one about transparency. The money, the speakers brought up good points that don't go on deaf ears on the board, that, you need a significant revenue on the horizon to pay for the things that are coming. and that are here. So the board, each board member has been involved in this significant revenue for the future, but it's not here today. So therefore, people's lie on the back of people's taxing. So you realize that every house that's built in King George only pays for 75% of their service. So if you have that equation, it doesn't work out over the long run. So you continue to raise people's taxes, but we need business. We need industry, as Mr. Stroud said. Ms. Parker said we need a significant revenue on the horizon. That is starting to occur. It's not here yet, but we're fully aware of past actions of past boards and how it affects the county today in the past. The second thing is transparency. So, you know, I always ask before every meeting and night before every meeting for the Holy Spirit to come upon me, not to say stupid things or to be too step out of line too much. But I do have a lot of heartache with the transparency issues. I have asked over and over and over for things that aren't included in the agenda packet, and it keeps going on deaf ears. Today at the Water Authority meeting, you hear that there is a discharge into one of the streams, and the board members didn't even know it happened, much less the Board of Supervisors. They also had to pay a $42,000. They called it many things. They called it an assessment. They called it a fine. Either way, it's coming out of the user's pocket of $42,000 to pay that fee. The online meetings, every meeting should be, so Ms. Bender mentioned about YouTube. Well, I have personally looked for these things and cannot find them. I know I'm not savvy with the internet, but I've tried many, many ways to try to find that. And they're not all on there. Some are on there and some are on there in a month and some are on there 3 months, 6 months later, but there's a lot of them that aren't on there. We're going to get to the FOIA in a few minutes on that policy, and I'm sure that you know that I will have a lot to say on that. Ms. Dodge, you talk about government working for the people. I'm not feeling that the government's working for the people. That's my feeling. I'm on your board. So what does that tell you? Ms. Fairfax, we do need to flush out the ordinance, and we need to, and public input is important, and the abuse of the FOIAs, you know, I have some thoughts on that on outside folks, but King George residents, everything should be available, touch to every resident all the time, whether they're on a board or whether they're not, whether they're in this audience, no matter where they're at, they should be available. And that includes the Board of Supervisors, the Planning Commission, the school board, and every other board and commission should be available to all the citizens to see what's going on. If you go out in this community and you ask people things, they will tell you that same theme about transparency. And then there's people that there's stuff going on that I have no idea about, and I'm on your board. So we got a lot of work to do there. So that will be concluding my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Mrs. Kupka?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, everyone, for coming out this evening. Thank you for providing comment. Mr. Rolls, I'm sorry that you weren't able to find the minutes that you were originally looking for, but I'm glad that our staff was able to provide you with the transcriptions. As Ms. Bender stated, the videos are available on YouTube if you aren't able to attend the meeting here in person like you are today. I want to thank Mrs. Parker, Mr. Stroud, and Ms. Dodge for their comments regarding the possibility of a tax increase. And Mr. Fairfax and Mrs. Fairfax, I think maybe we've gotten a little ahead of ourselves because the ordinance item, the economic development ordinance item, Defense Production Zone and Technology Zone ordinance is actually just on for another presentation and report this evening. There is no formal ordinance that has been drafted at this time. It's my understanding, because it's not in this packet that we've all been provided. And just for transparency, back when Mr. Minor first provided an initial presentation to us on February 21st, 2023, there was consensus of the board we directed Mr. Minor to continue working on it. And another board member even said, I would be interested in an ordinance and maybe the tax section for economic development for these zones for the purpose financially. I would want to target these industries to diversify our tax base, but for financial incentives. I'd like to just keep that in that narrow scope. So there was consensus at that time to direct Mr. Minor to bring this back. He's apparently bringing it back to us this evening. It's not on for action because there's no ordinance. And anytime we change our ordinances or adopt a new ordinance, and this would be a brand new ordinance, Code of Virginia requires us to have a public hearing. So I don't want anyone to worry that this is going to be adopted tonight. This cannot be adopted tonight. We don't have a copy of the written ordinance yet, and we haven't had a public hearing. So again, I just want to reassure everyone of that. I hope you will stick around and listen to Mr. Minor's presentation. I'm sure he'll tell us what the differences are between this presentation and the last one he did for us in February. Now, moving on from that, Wednesday, June 7th, I attended the Service Authority budget work session. Thursday, June 8th, attended the Board of Supervisors CIP budget work session. I want to thank both staff for their continued work on the budgets. If you're tracking Commonwealth Transportation Board news, and so for those of you who aren't aware of the process, anytime a locality files a smart scale application, and normally we can do 4 or 5 of those a year with VDOT for road funding, it eventually works its way through the process and is heard by the Commonwealth Transportation Board, the board in Richmond that doles out all of VDOT's money. So last month, the Commonwealth Transportation Board reached consensus to recommend the removal of the City of Fredericksburg's smart scale request for funds for commuter bus service to Dahlgren, noting, quote, there is no service on the Dahlgren base to transport commuters to their final destination. So while that's unfortunate, I can understand their rationale. There's nowhere for those folks, no way for those folks to get anywhere once they get dropped off at the gate. However, that was to be a $4.1 million district grant program funding. That freed up $4.1 million from the district grant program. And tomorrow, if all goes well, the Commonwealth Transportation Board will have their action meeting. And if they adopt the 6-year plan as recommended and there was consensus for at their meeting last month, the US 301 Port Conway Salem Church roadway improvement application for King George County for $3.4 million will be approved. So I want to thank staff for their work on that. I also want to thank our CTB representative, Laura Sellers. It is my understanding she was instrumental in paving the way for one of our projects to move forward against a lot of competing interests from the other localities in Planning District 16. On other transportation notes, I spoke with Mr. Beal after the last meeting. He's the Northern Neck Residency Administrator for VDOT about the rumble strips. We have heard lots of comment about the rumble strips. He did say that the rumble strips on the shoulder line were a statewide decision made by VDOT to use federal HSIP funds. I believe that's the Highway Safety Improvement Program Fund. Federal funds to install them on all state routes. The further the rumble strip is outside the line, the less effective it is in keeping the motor vehicle off the shoulder, because once you're on the shoulder and you're hitting the rumble strip, it's too late. That's why they placed it on the line. And the goal was to keep the shoulder clear for bicyclists to use. So unfortunately, on the local level, we did not have any say whatsoever in that decision that was made on the state level. And then also with regard to engine braking, the General Assembly in the past has determined that VDOT cannot restrict a truck from using its brakes and ordered that no new signs limiting engine braking could be installed on state roads. So if there are jurisdictions, and there might be one around here that I've seen still have the signs up, they're not supposed to have those signs up anymore. And then lastly, I do have an appointment. I move to appoint Ms. Carol Sondrini to the at-large vacancy on the Economic Development Authority.
Second.
We have a motion properly seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries.
That's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mrs. Kupka. Mr. Stonehill.
Thank you. Good evening. I just want to say thanks for everybody that came out. We're seeing new faces. It's good. I'd like to see more new faces. I'm not going to go into everything that they've all covered it, but yeah, nobody wants a tax increase. We all have to pay them. Everybody has to pay them. Sometimes it's just the cost of doing business, but I'm not a favor of it. I did have a couple of people that came down and spoke to me this week in my office, and they were also against it. And they were also speaking about the residential growth here in the county. They did speak, like Mr. Collins did say, about the amount of rooftops coming in, or Mrs. Bender, whoever said that down at that end, not paying for their services. They had also complained or spoke about the waste that goes on in all government, not just King George County, but it just seems to be the government way. And if there ever gets to be a point here in our local small little government here to stop the government way, that's going to go a long ways. They also spoke about a couple of the folks that had come in from other areas, and they were come-heres. I'm also a come-here, so I can say that. That they come here because of low taxes. It's rural, but then they want. So the taxes then go up from there. So I had a couple of folks, and they come and spoke to me. June 8th, like Mrs. Kupka said, we were all of us were at the CIP budget. Hopefully we can get a handle on that and get that wrapped up. The missing info and packets, like Mrs. Kupka said, this is about the development incentive zones. This is just a presentation. It's just information. That's why it's not in the packet. We get a lot of those. It's just a presentation. Nobody's voting on anything. It's just information for us, information for the public. I have yet to come across something that we were voting on that has to be in our agenda for the public to see. I can't think of anybody that we've missed at that time that we are doing a vote on. Anything that we get here on our desk is just for information purposes. And that's all I have, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Stonehill. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to everyone who came out to provide public comment. Number of people speaking about the tax rate and the budget. I don't disagree with you. Anytime we address the tax rate, it has an impact to people. Whether you increase it, it has an impact. If you don't increase it, it has an impact. We have schools currently that have a 9% vacancy rate with their teacher population. That has an impact to the education of our students. Working to address that, looking at, how can you address that? And I agree, I don't want to raise taxes either. I pay those as well. I'm not excited about it, but I do want to make sure our children are educated, and that is a priority. So I look at it from that perspective as well. I agree with Mr. Collins as well. Big businesses bringing in something in order to address those needs and finding a way to provide that revenue not borne by the taxpayer so we can bring down the taxes, in fact, would be what I would really like to see. And we are actively working towards those endeavors. So yes, that is what I would like to do. I don't want to blow up King George and be Stafford or Spotsy in regards to development either, but you can do smart development and you can find the right project that will have a real positive impact to your community, and it can be transformative. So that's kinds of activities we're looking to bring in. I do agree. So as Ms. Kupka and Mr. Stonehill mentioned, this is a presentation, but especially if we have a county presentation, I think there's value in trying to provide it into the packet as early as possible. It is of value for citizens to be able to see it. I would really like us to work to get those into our packet earlier on, and so that everyone can review them, even though it might not be something we're voting on. People being able to review that information and see it beforehand, I think, is of value. So I think we should work to do that, especially from our county department's perspective. I can appreciate sometimes we have out of county people coming to present something, and if they don't provide something, we can't force them to. Those might be a little more tricky, and there could be some situations where those might get lost if it's a presentation. But in-house, I think we should work to provide those. So as my colleague said, we did have a CIP budget work session on June 8th. I appreciate staff's time in preparing that and providing information, and my colleagues for working through that. And then the last thing I would like to do, because we will be voting on the budget, and I would like to make a disclosure. I wish to disclose that my wife is currently employed by the King George County School Board. Based on the disclosure previously given of this interest, this does not pose a legal conflict, and I can participate in budget decisions fairly, objectively, and in the public's interest. So that is the extent of my board report. So we will close member board reports, and we'll move on to the consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
We have a motion properly seconded. Do we have any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Constitutional officers, officials reports. I believe Ms. Hart said she was not going to be here for the revenue from the cigarette tax, but she did provide information, the email I know to the board. And she didn't. Did she not have someone else that was going to show up to provide?
Not to my knowledge. I think she just forwarded that to you all. If you would like me to pull it up, I can review it, or you all should have it.
Okay. And then we do also have the sheriff's office, but I don't see sheriff.
I'm online, Mr. Chair.
Awesome. Thank you, Sheriff. I will go ahead and let you go if you would like to provide your report.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. On May 18th, Ms. Price and Deputy Simon conducted an inspection of all the stores in King George that sell cigarettes. During their inspection, Deanna talked with the clerk of the Tobacco Hut and Vape Shop located at 7975 Kings Highway. Deanna said that she sent the store and the store's headquarters a certified letter advising them that they had not received an inventory sheet from them in months. Deanna has personally talked to the clerk during the several past inspections about this matter. The clerk called their store's headquarters and spoke with the manager on speakerphone. Deanna told the manager the store was not filling out the required inventory paperwork. This paperwork is required monthly according to the county code section. The manager stated that they would take care of this matter immediately, and the store should have the next inventory form turned in by today's date. All other stores otherwise in compliance with King George County tax stamp regulations. That concludes my report. I can answer any questions if any board members have them.
Thank you, Sheriff. Did anyone have any questions for the sheriff? Okay. Thank you, Sheriff. I think we're good.
Thank you.
And then do we have anyone from the treasurer's office here? Awesome. Thank you.
Good evening. Tonight I'll be reading the May receipts and expenditures. The beginning balance was $36,751,163.40. Receipts were $19,500,769.19. Disbursements $23,815,833.71, with an ending balance of $32,436,098.88.
Did anyone have any questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Miller, could you make sure those get added to the minutes?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did you have Ms. Hart's correspondence?
Yes. 1 second. I had it. I think you also all received it, I believe. And she indicated She could not be there, but she indicated that, oh, you have it. Yeah, it's right here. Money collected for cigarette stamps from July 2022 to the present is $1,728,040. And the total packs of cigarettes sold in April of 2023 was $317,116.
Thank you, Mr. Miller, for providing that information. Did anyone have any questions that maybe we should have directed to the Commissioner of Revenue's office in regards to this information?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Not directly about the reporting, the number that was reported to us, but follow up with regard to what the sheriff indicated in his report, because it looks to me from reading our cigarette tax ordinance that it is the duty falls upon the commissioner to administratively assess the tax due and unpaid and impose a penalty of 50% if they fail to file a report or file a fraudulent report. So I just want to make sure that if it was stated that the report already late was going to be filed today, I want to make sure that we have a way to follow up so that if it was not, we enforce our code here, because we have this here for a reason. They are making a lot of money selling cigarettes in our community, and they need to follow the law. Thank you.
So would everyone be okay with directing Mr. Miller to reach out to the Commissioner of the Revenue in order to follow up on that and report back to the board at the next meeting? All right, Mr. Miller?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. I believe that's our constitutional officers' reports, so we'll move on to the county attorney's report. Mrs. Lackey.
Good evening. I wanted to mention that as of July 1st, all public bodies are required to have a written policy that explains how charges are assessed and what fees are applied for FOIA responses. The county has such a policy. It's been in place since 2018. So I just wanted to dust it off and bring it to you all in case there was any interest in making any changes. One change that is required by law that's in your agenda package is that the statutory notice has changed slightly since 2018. So there's the first major paragraph is directly from the statute, and it says the required language has been amended to match what the legal requirement is. And then I've suggested some clarifications just to make it easier to read. I didn't see a significant difference in how costs were calculated among the various parties who might respond to a cost, so I simplified that language. And then I made some changes, suggested changes with regard to the discretionary waiver of costs. Firstly, because the policy mentions constitutional officers, the county does not handle FOIA requests for constitutional officers, so we can't really direct or say anything with regard to what constitutional officers might do. So I've instead of having some discretionary waivers by certain officials, I suggested that discretion reside with the Board of Supervisors should they choose to exercise it. And I gave a couple examples where it might be warranted, such as where information is generated at the request of perhaps just one individual, but it's perceived to be of such benefit that it's posted to the website or included in the agenda packet for general information for general consumption. That might be a circumstance where a discretionary waiver of costs might be appropriate. FOIA requests do take significant staff time, and they can be abused. In my profession, in the legal profession, it's very costly to go to litigation. If you can get information through that you would otherwise get in the discovery process through FOIA, it's something that people will use. It doesn't make a difference if you are a resident of King George. Under FOIA, we have to treat all citizens of the Commonwealth or entities with a business presence in the Commonwealth or media the same. There was a bill introduced this past legislative session, which would have required that any individual could make up to 4 requests in a 31-day period. And as long as those requests did not total 2 hours of time, then they should be comped the time. That bill further said that the staff time should be capped at a rate of $33 per hour unless there is affirmative court approval for a higher rate. That bill did not pass. Jackie Fish has been our FOIA coordinator for the better part of this year. I handled January, I think part of February. We've received what we've been able to track, at least 30 FOIA requests, and only 5 have merited bills. Those bills have ranged in cost from $40 to just north of $1,000. The $1,000 one was definitely an outlier. It was a large amount of time. And in fact, it would have cost more time if I had billed the time that was involved on my part in responding to that request, which we declined to do. So we have made a commitment consistent with the law to reduce costs. But I did want to state, since we had the data, that we do handle a large volume of FOIA requests. And that's not including someone walking up to a desk and getting some immediate customer service. The current policy provides that if staff time does not exceed 30 minutes, then there's no bill is given. That's been the policy since 2018. And I have added to proposed amendments to retain that 30-minute time limit, but I also added that there would not be a charge if the total cost does not exceed $10. For example, there are certain boards and commissions where people get a small stipend from the county that would be part of their hourly rate, but we wouldn't bill in such small increments that it wouldn't be worth the time of billing. So once again, the existing policy would not change. If staff time exceeds 30 minutes, then it would be billed. This is comparable to other jurisdictions. Spotsylvania currently charges if it is more than 5 minutes of staff time or the equivalent of exceeding 31 hard copy pages or the dollar equivalent of more than $5 of staff time. Costs may be waived only as to other governmental entities that either have a reciprocity for exchange of documents or if it's determined that by a department head to respond to another governmental entity free of charge. No time is billed by Spotsylvania if staff time is expended just to determine if there is already an existing record that's responsive on the website. Stafford's policy is probably the most similar to ours. They charge if there's more than 30 minutes of staff time. And Chesapeake charges if there's more than 15 minutes of staff time. The FOIA Advisory Council, which is just an advisory body, did suggest that jurisdictions consider waiving costs if they're less than $50. But I have not seen that to be the case of the jurisdictions that have posted policies. As I've said, it can add up significantly when people are making multiple requests in a short period of time, making a very cumbersome request that requires a lot of staff time. So my recommendation is to retain the 30-minute rule with possibly the additional amendments that are shown in the agenda packet. And the FOIA policy that was enacted in 2018, it's a longer policy. I've just provided the excerpt that was related to costs. So as a secondary recommendation, also similar to how the FOIA policy is in practice in Spotsylvania, I would recommend, if it's the direction of this board, that you would grant the authority to me to update those provisions just so that they comply with the law and for clarity. I think probably the most controversial part, if I'm not mistaken, is the cost policy. So that's why I'm bringing forward proposed changes to the cost policy. But I think the FOIA policy as a whole could be overhauled, and that could be done either by authorizing me to update it consistent with the law, or I could at a future board meeting bring it back to you all. And so that's my presentation on FOIA costs.
Thank you, Mrs. Lackey. Does anyone have any questions for Mrs. Lackey? Does anyone have any comments?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Lackey, for your work on this. I would like to see a more robust update to the entire policy. I think it's great that you address the costs, but we need the whole policy to be in compliance with state code, I think. So that'd be what I'm looking for as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Virginia Freedom of Information Act. Freedom of information. So in the section that's quoted, 2.23704.1, a public body may make reasonable charges. Doesn't say it has to make charges to people. I am more in favor of people that would abuse the Freedom of Information Act. The gentleman from Imboden earlier came to the Service Authority meeting, and he said that he FOIA'd Virginia Department of Health for bacterial site plans for King George before they took over the contract here. That is a company that makes money for a living. And I asked him how many pages, and he said hundreds of pages. And I asked him how much did it cost, and he said nothing. So you got the Virginia Department of Health that is a for-profit business is given FOIA at no cost. It smacks in the face of transparency every which way but loose. The FOIA is for the information. So why are we charging? Number one, we talk about the charges. So if the county administrator has to produce information, it costs one cost. If Ms. Fish has to provide the information, it costs another cost. If you all are going to go down the line of cost, it should be a scheduled cost. It shouldn't be a I don't think there should be any cost at all for citizens personally. I don't know how that flies with y'all, but I myself had to pay $500 for information that I should have received from the county, and I'm on the board, and it was about board information, and I had to pay for my FOIA. Now, tell me if that's not totally whacked out. There's no good reason that even happened. The rest of the transparency where we get not stuff in the, I would like the consensus of the board for the agenda packet to have all the information in it and posted. And if it's not posted, then we remove that from the item, including outside agencies or outside people that are coming and do a presentation. If they can't provide the information prior, because they've done a slide presentation, they got it ready. There's no reason why they can't send it and put it in the packet. It occurs over and over and over again. And, people want to know what's going on. And this is what the Freedom of Information Act is for, is to let people know what's going on. And I think that if you start doing this with costs to county residents specifically, that it's unfair. 2 cents per page, actual cost of mail for the request. Documents from GIS, the GIS has a different schedule. Also, when you're asking for FOIA information, the person when you ask for FOIA, you should ask the FOIA administrator, and they should provide the information. If I'm asking for Ms. Bender's emails, Ms. Bender shouldn't be providing me emails. If I'm asking for Mr. Granger emails, he shouldn't be providing me emails, or anybody else. Mr. Dines should be providing the emails or text messages. So you shouldn't have, number one, you shouldn't have the person providing the information. I'm not saying these people would do that, but some people may choose to send you the information they choose to send you. And so I'm gonna stop right there.
Ms. Lackey, would it be possible for us to only bill non-residents? Is that something we could codify legally?
I think that would likely invite challenges. The FOIA is supposed to be neutral as to who the requester is and what the purpose of the request is.
Well, the code says may. So why can't we may not charge county residents and may charge businesses or outside entity? Why doesn't that a may?
I think what she's saying is it's may either across the board or may not across the board. It's not cherry picking particular situations to charge and not to charge for different types of groups?
Well, I think that if you might go around and look at some of other policies and so forth, that you might be able to cherry pick for county residents. If you have a policy, if you follow your policy and it conforms with the state law, I think that it could work. But if you don't have a policy or a schedule or any of that stuff, then you do open yourself up to liabilities.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I know being on state bodies that FOIA is another issue that keeps coming up, and there's a very big push to be more open with FOIA and not make it so cost prohibitive for those seeking information. So I would like to look at some less language and maybe more, I don't know how we do it to make sure that I knew it's a lot of staff time because I've been part in these many years. I've been on the board of numerous FOIA requests, and some of them took several days. That was before Mr. Dines could cull all the emails. So I understand our staff, that is a lot of time and effort. So what is a happy medium, I guess, is what I'm asking. Because I understand those residents that want information because they feel they're not getting enough information. They should be able to have access to information. So if we're going to charge, what on our side can we do better to make sure the information is out there on social media with our new staff in place or on the website? So there might be ways on our side we could not make it so that everybody has to FOIA, that we make an effort to make it more transparent on our side, on our website, social media. And I think our staff is trying to do that, but that might be a way also.
Mr. Collins, just something else?
Yes, sir. Thank you. So as far as staff, so my county taxes and everyone else's county taxes pay for staff to do that work. So I'm already paying for the FOIA when I ask for it. I'm already paying the taxes for the employee to provide that. An outside business organization is not paying the tax in this county for that. So I'm already paying for it. Why do I have to pay for it again?
Okay, so I heard Ms. Kupka said she would like to see the policy overhauled, not just with the cost, but everything. Mr. Collins would like to investigate whether there's any, I think, other policies that we could maybe look to from within Virginia that might provide maybe some language that would allow us to remove citizens from being targeted as part of this, to see if there's anything out there. Ms. Binder, did you have any recommendations in particular for dealing with the policy, or was it more, I felt like it was more just comments about trying to get more information out in general, and that staff is working towards that?
I guess one would be, I would agree, is there a way that we could, is it legal to only have non-citizens pay? I would agree with that.
So I'll ask my other colleagues as well. Are you amenable to having Ms. Lackey look into other Virginia localities to see if there's anything that we could look at that might provide some guidance on maybe how to go about doing that, or what other investigation could possibly be done to see if that is a possibility legally? Obviously, if it's not legal, I would not be in favor of moving forward with it, but I don't necessarily disagree with Mr. Collins's point. I'm not looking to charge the citizens necessarily. I just, if you have a big business that's coming in, I don't want to give them free rein either. So.
I don't have a problem with that. I think that it's going to be very apparent to our attorney when she reviews the code, how it's interpreted. So I don't think it's going to take a lot of legwork for her to get that done. But I would also point out, I don't know that we're talking about every public record. I think for me, what I find more burdensome as far as staff time is emails. And there is a section G, that reads public records maintained by a public body in an electronic data processing system, computer database, or any other structured collection of data shall be made available to a requester at a reasonable cost, not to exceed the actual cost in accordance with subsection F. So to me, when there is a burden such as retrieving emails, and the burden is much less now that Mr. Dines can go on the back end and pull them down, I don't feel it's unreasonable to assess a cost for that. Thank you.
Okay, so barring anyone else's input, I think overhauling the rest of the policy as well to address any of those law changes that have been put into place, as well as the investigation, I guess, due diligence to make sure that, what can we do from a legal perspective. So
Sure. As I said, there's an existing policy, so we meet the criteria of the law, but I'd be happy to bring back a more detailed review for you all.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Ms. Lack. Did you have anything else for your report, or was that the only item?
I guess it's worth mentioning as a lead up, since we're going into an opioid presentation, the Opioid Abatement Authority is meeting on the 23rd to consider the regional proposals for opioid abatement, and the proposal between King George and some of the surrounding jurisdictions is on the list of proposals that's recommended for approval. So we'll know after the 23rd, but we have high hopes.
Anyone have any questions or comments about that? Okay, thank you, Ms. Lackey. We'll move on to presentations. And so we will start with the opioid harm reduction presentation by the Virginia Department of Health.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, board. My name is Bengo Basandra. I'm the health director for the Pioneer Area Health District of the Virginia Department of Health, and presenting with me today is Ms. Eligny McNeil from the RACSB, the Pioneer Area CSB. Today, thank you. Today we're going to be talking about harm reduction. Ms. Lackey also mentioned about the opioid abatement. That's not what we're talking about. It's just good timing. You might remember last year I came to present our community health assessment and community health improvement plan. This conversation today is in continuation of that. If you remember, two of our priorities were access to healthcare and mental health. And in some of the work we've been doing since we prepared, we worked on the chart on the chip. This is some of what has been coming out of it, and this is more an information session. I will be presenting 3 slides just on data, and then Eligny will be doing more of a deeper dive into harm reduction and sort of what we think it is, and sort of what's going on in the community. There is no ask per se. It's more a idea session and then kind of questions, and then let's start a conversation. Next slide, please. This is our slides, agenda for today. Next slide. Like I said, I'm going to be talking about data. This first slide is deaths per 100,000 for all the counties in PD16 and the state of Virginia. As you can see, all our counties are higher than the state of Virginia. King George is kind of straddling there with Stafford County as one of the lowest in PD16, but it's still high. Again, these are death rates per 100,000. This is we use this in public health to sort of standardize rates because of population differences. So in the next slide, we actually look at numbers of deaths. In a smaller county like King George, we have relatively low numbers. But remember, each of these deaths in a small county like this is an individual, it's a family member. It has ripple, second order and third order effects in the community and a small community like this. Next slide, please. This next slide is the emergency room visits over the same time period. Now, again, in a small community with small numbers, it sort of goes all over the place. I can tell you that in Other counties where we have bigger numbers, Stafford, Spotsy, what we've been seeing very clearly is the deaths going up while the emergency room visits are going down. And that is really a bad sign. It's probably by the time if we combine all the results, that's probably what we're seeing. It's not a good signal. It's telling us that individuals are probably the rate of drug use is increasing. People are using it at home and dying on their own. That's the last slide I have, and I'll hand over to Eleni.
Thanks. I can't multitask that well. My name's Eleni McNeil. Like Dr. O said, I'm an LCSW and I work at RACSB as their Substance Use Services Coordinator. Before I jump into harm reduction, I just want to preface my piece of the presentation with, when we're looking at harm reduction, it can be incorporated into treatment, but it's not always treatment. When we've done this presentation in other counties, one of the questions has been, what about prevention? What about treatment? Those things absolutely have a really important place in our communities as well. But harm reduction is for that reactive approach to people that are already currently actively using. So I just wanted to preface it with that. So when we think about harm reduction, just to zoom out a little bit further in the society as a whole, we use harm reduction in lots of different ways in our community already, through having our kids wear bike helmets while they're riding their bikes down the street, putting sunscreen on when we're out at the beach so we don't get sunburn, using speed limits on our roadways to try and keep people, relatively safe with the flow of traffic, using designated drivers when you go out drinking. And, in the substance use realm, we have nicotine patches and methadone and Narcan, which are all also harm reduction techniques. So when we're talking about with opioid use, we are talking about a set of practical strategies and ideas aimed at reducing consequences associated with drug use. And so I like to sum that up as harm reduction equals reducing harm. We are trying to keep people alive, and we're trying to mitigate the risks that they are exposed to through their drug use. Some myths that people get with harm reduction is that it might be encouraging clients to use or is condoning their behaviors. It is none of those things. We are never encouraging somebody to use that's using. We're never condoning risky or dangerous behaviors. We're actually trying to discourage them. And we are definitely not dismissing or discouraging treatment or abstinence models. Like I said, treatment sometimes incorporates harm reduction, but harm reduction is not always treatment. Sometimes it's just keeping that person alive. So harm reduction is something that has pretty broad political support on both sides of the spectrum. Governor Youngkin recently signed an executive order on May 9th on Fentanyl Awareness Day, identifying response to the opioid epidemic in the state of Virginia as a top priority for our state, examining waterways, increasing naloxone distribution, and other strategies. It's also been cited by the Biden-Harris administration and lots of their policies as well. They came out with a pretty comprehensive opioid epidemic policy when they first came into the administration as well. If you could go back for a second. Just from a research standpoint, it also has decades of research showing that harm reduction improves outcomes for people, and it improves, it's cost effective. And I know there's been lots of talks about cost and budget and everything tonight. Go ahead. So some of the positives that come with using harm reduction as a strategy in our community is reduced experience of judgment and stigma for the people that are actively using. And that reduction in judgment and stigma increases the likelihood that they're going to access treatment when they're ready. Feeling like they can be honest about their use makes them less fearful to actually share it when they need the help. It reduces disease transmission, specifically Hep C and HIV, especially in people that are IV drug users. It also reduces, use needles in your communities, through needle exchange programs and things like that. It reduces the risk of overdose deaths, which, as the first couple of slides showed, we are not doing great, especially when compared to the state of Virginia as PD 16 as a whole. It reduces health complications, not just Hep C and HIV, but also abscesses and wounds and other complications that they often face as a result of their drug use. Our first responders are also dealing with this every single day. They're the ones responding to these overdose deaths. They're the ones having to tell the families that their loved one has passed away. They're the ones having to place these kids into foster care. If we can reduce overdose deaths, we can also reduce the amount of times that our first responders are having to have those conversations and deliver that news. And like I said, it is reduced cost over time. It's a lot cheaper to buy a fentanyl test strip than it is to pay for an ambulance and ER visit and ICU stay. So this is kind of the continuum of care for harm reduction. On the far side, we have Good Samaritan laws, which Virginia just passed and went into effect last July, where somebody can call EMS to respond to an overdose, and if they identify themselves as the caller, they are not able to be charged, to try and encourage people to access and get to the emergency room. Educating people that are actively using on ways to use more safely so they reduce their risk of disease transmission is another harm reduction strategy. So for instance, if you have somebody that is a needle user and that's their preferred route, you might talk to them about smoking instead, because then they're not exposing themselves to bloodborne pathogens. They're not having to find a way to dispose of their used needles. Medication-assisted treatment in our community, there's methadone clinics, there's buprenorphine or Suboxone, and there's also naltrexone, which is Vivitrol. The CSB offers Suboxone and Vivitrol currently, and there are a lot of other community providers that offer medication-assisted treatment too in our area. Naloxone or Narcan, as most people have heard of it, is an opioid overdose reversal drug. I brought a little sample of the bag that people get when they go through the training, if nobody's ever seen what Narcan looks like. It is a tiny little nasal spray. This is going to be my Vanna.
It's okay. Could you hand it to Mr. Dionsfield?
Sorry.
It's okay.
But it's a tiny little needle spray that has a squirt per nostril, and it can reduce an overdose. RACSB offers virtual trainings for free every single month, and at the close of it, you get a dose of Narcan to carry around with you. And I think these are really important for people, even if they don't know people that are actively using, because overdoses are happening in our community every single day at gas stations, convenience stores, Walmart, other stores, Fentanyl test strips are another harm reduction strategy where clients who are actively using that do not want to be using fentanyl can have test strips to be able to test their drugs to make sure that they do not have fentanyl in them. We've recently purchased xylazine test strips as well, which, if you're not familiar with xylazine, it's a drug that is being increasingly found in confiscated drugs that also contributes to overdose. It is not an opioid, it's a veterinary tranquilizer, and it can be very fatal, especially when paired with fentanyl. Then, the things that we don't have in our community at this time, but other areas of the state do have, are syringe service programs, which would be like a syringe exchange. You take your used needles, you turn them in so they can be safely disposed of, so they're not out in the community in playgrounds and beach sand and all that stuff. And in exchange, you receive clean needles. And then, there are some places in the country that have started using safe injection sites. New York City has 2 currently running, and Rhode Island is preparing to open one up in the next year. They just secured a federal grant to study the efficacy of safe injection sites. And the numbers that I have found when I was doing a little research for this presentation, The New York City sites have had over 50,000 individual uses of people using those sites. They've had 700 overdoses out of those uses, and they've had 0 fatalities out of those 700, which I think is pretty substantial. That's 700 people that could have died that were saved. So that is kind of the continuum of care. But just to hone in a little more on what we're currently doing in our community, which is really why we're here tonight. We want to open the dialogue on what we're doing and that there is the problem in the community. And we want this to be an ongoing conversation as time goes on, as we maybe do have asks in the future of the localities. We have Good Samaritan laws, obviously, the whole state has them. We do educate clients on safer use that are actively using. Those are people that are not ready to stop using yet, and I need them to be alive for when they are ready to stop using. We use medication-assisted treatment. Like I said, we offer Suboxone and Vivitrol at RACSB. And we do Narcan trainings monthly. We're always at the community events doing Revive trainings as well. And we hand out fentanyl and xylazine test strips for people that are in need of them. Those are just some resources for anyone interested in learning more on the topic. And I do have some handout for you all. Just a few statistics on the handouts. 80% of overdoses occur inside of the home, and 40% of them occur with somebody else present. Accidental exposure to medication is a leading cause of poisoning in children, and 92% of pediatric opioid poisonings occur inside their home. And I think that one in particular is why it is especially important for everybody to have Narcan. So I just wanted to highlight those 2 statistics as well.
Thank you so much for the brief and the presentation. I'm sorry, did I cut you off? Okay. Did anyone have any questions? Okay, go ahead, Ms. Spinner. We'll start with you.
Thank you. I know she said it was good to have Narcan in your home. If somebody wanted to get some, how would they go about getting some for their home?
So our ACSB offers several free trainings a month. The full training is about an hour long. At the end, you get a prescription for your own dose of Narcan. We're also always at the community events. We'll be at Pride this weekend. I'll be there handing out fentanyl test strips with my colleagues who will be doing Narcan trainings. The event trainings take about 10 to 15 minutes, and you'll leave with your Narcan in hand. People can also go to pharmacies, though, and just request it from the pharmacist, and they will run it through insurance, and there may be cost that way. And they just recently authorized over-the-counter Narcan distribution, but that's not quite up and running yet.
Yeah, and then my second question was on some statistical information. How do we get the numbers based on King George and Caroline don't have 100,000 people? So how do you fix the data points to get that percentage?
It's based on where the people, either the deaths or the hospitalizations, where they say they live, and where their billing and other information, where it goes to. So that's how we know where they live, where either the death is from or.
Well, what my confusion was, we don't have it. It's per 100,000, so we don't have 100,000 residents.
Well, but I gave you the numbers, the actual numbers, and that's why I was explaining that we standardize it. We take the number, divide it by the population, and then multiply it by 100,000 just to standardize, so we can compare different populations.
Okay, thank you for explaining that further.
Mr. Collins.
So as you speak today, we've had 2 overdoses that were transported to the hospital that I know of. It's the ones that called 911. So I think the number is usually higher than what's reported. Can you get online training for the Narcan?
Yes, both of our trainings that we're offering through the agency are virtual right now. I'm not sure how they work the pickup. You may just come pick the prescription up or pick up the dose, but the training itself is virtual.
So, one question about your presentation. I might have heard it incorrectly, but just correct me. You said you'd rather people smoke drugs than to inject them. Is that what you said?
I'd rather them not use them at all. But if they are actively using, yes, smoking would be considered safer than injecting because you're not exposing yourself to the risk of infection or Hep C or HIV or other complications that could come from needle use. And a lot of the times they'll use through needle because of how quickly it gets into the system. But smoking is also a very quick way to introduce it to their system if that's their goal.
I know you're not here about treatment, but that seems to be an obstacle that seems to be with folks that are working through their addictions, that they can't get treatment. I mean, I've heard it once, I've heard it 1,000 times. And so I think that we're very laxed in this state in regards to treatment. That's a statement, that's not a question.
Could I respond to it?
Yes, ma'am?
I absolutely agree with you. And one of my priorities in my role at the CSB is increasing access to treatment for people, particularly with opioid use or IV drug use. When people call us that are actively using opioids or using via intravenously, I make sure that somebody on my team reaches out to them within 24 hours to establish contact with them, even if we're not able to get them seen for the intake within 24 hours. And if they're seeking the medication-assisted treatment program that we have, we are usually able to get them in, assessed, and seen by the doctor and started on the medication within a week.
Is part of the plan mental health treatment?
So in our medication, are you asking about our medication-assisted treatment program?
Well, so today, or last day and a half, there's been 2 suicide attempts. I don't know what fashion they were because it's not reported as how, but I would imagine that often that it's by pills or some other form to do with drug abuse. So I'm asking about the piece of the mental health with drug addiction.
Yeah, people that come into our substance use, that are seeking treatment for substance use services and come into our therapy services, we address both. I don't really believe that you can address one without addressing the other because I think so often they're closely interrelated.
How about if they start out with a mental health crisis and go down that next road? Is there prevention in regards to that with the Rappahannock Community Service Board?
We definitely would address both if they began using. We're constantly reassessing people that we work with to make sure that the treatment is the right treatment at the right time. Our prevention team, if you're asking about prevention, does a lot of prevention work, and I think they've presented at King George High School before. I think they have a pretty good relationship with them, and I know that they've offered hidden in plain sight activities through King George's, I think it was the sheriff's department. I actually had an opportunity to sit in one of those, which is where parents can go through a mock bedroom to see potential signs of substance use in like a mock teens bedroom. And it's a really cool event if you have the opportunity to go. I hope that answers that question.
Ms. Kopka?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much to both of you for joining us this evening and providing your presentation. And I would just add to Mr. Collins' comments, if anyone in the public wants to see some of the data, if you look at the end of tonight's board packet, every month Chief Moody provides us with a full rundown of all of the calls that his department runs. And sometimes it's identified in the original incident complaint reported by dispatch, and it'll say overdose, accidental, overdose, intentional. And sometimes just the symptoms are reported in the incident complaint, but then the next column is the situation provider primary impression description only, which is the medic who ran the call to that house and treated that patient will sometimes come right out and say narcotic overdose, heroin, fentanyl, whatever. So this does happen in our community. And if anyone wants to take a closer look at the kinds of calls that our brave men and women in our fire department and our sheriff's office are running, feel free to look at the end of the report tonight. Thank you very much.
No questions, but just thank you for coming out. A lot of good information. It does happen right here in our county, plus, all the other counties as well, but thank you.
So again, thank you so much for coming out and briefing. I will ask, so you spoke to the educating clients on safer use, and you talk about medication assisted treatment. And you talked about the fact that educating clients on safer use had to deal with those who are not necessarily ready for treatment. Do you have any activities to help those people who are not currently ready for treatment to move into that space? Obviously, I think that's probably the end goal. You want to help people to stop using. I appreciate, it's addiction is a terrible thing, and it's not as easy as just stopping. But yeah, do you have any kind of programs to try to help people transition, I guess, to that decision?
I don't know about programs, but definitely techniques and strategies. And I really appreciate you recognizing that it's so much more than just stopping. A lot of using a harm reduction approach, it's more kind of like a mindset. It's a lot of like meeting the client where they're at while always trying to see if you can kind of get some change talk, some willingness to change something, and if they're willing to change injecting to smoking, that might be a really big change for them. And then kind of looking at like, what might that next change be for you? Maybe you're only using on the weekend versus Monday through Sunday. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. I think that was the only other question I had. My colleague said a fair number that we're good. So did anyone else have anything else? Okay. Again, thank you so much for coming out and briefing us on this. So, all right, Mr. Minor.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the board. I'm here tonight to present on the economic development incentive zones. Just a quick overview of the technology and defense zones, qualification and proposed incentives, the process, the proposed areas, targeted and qualified industries, and I'll take any of your questions. So the first is going to be the technology zones. What we've narrowed down to, well, I guess I'll just go over what is allowed in the technology zone. My apologies. So it's an incentive that can go up to 10 years. It's targeted at the technology-based industries. The county can provide a reduction in permit fees, a reduction in user fees, a reduction in any types of gross receipts. Specifically for Virginia, that's BPOL, and a reduction in personal property taxes. For the defense production zone, all things are similar, except that incentive period can be extended for 20 years. So what I am proposing for qualification for incentives in King George County, for an existing business that is located within the zones, it would require a minimum capital investment of $500,000 that can be in real property or personal property, and a creation of at least 5 new jobs or full-time equivalents within the first 3 years of expansion. For a new business locating within the zone, a minimum capital investment of $1 million, a creation of at least 10 new jobs or FTEs within the first 3 years, and then that duplicates itself for the defense production zone, just for simplicity. So the proposed incentives for King George. So technology zones, reductions in whole or part for BPOL, machineries and tools tax, tangible personal property taxes, permits, and user fees. Then the same is for defense production. So to explain the whole or in part, this is a discretionary incentive. So the county can make a decision, or I should say the Board of Supervisors can make a decision whether they want to give that incentive, well, reduce those taxes in whole or 50%, 70%, 85%, whichever number that the board agrees to. And that applies for each one. So we're just leaving it open because it's going to be dealt with on a case-by-case basis based off of the application that they make to my department and the recommendation that I make to the Board of Supervisors, but that control is still within the Board of Supervisors to whether they want to approve that or not. For the proposed areas, so the one we are looking at here is the Route 3 West Settlement. This is in the comprehensive plan, and what we're looking at here is just what's outlined. So the areas outside of this, I believe this is maybe in the James Monroe. I think it just shows, you know, what's not proposed in that settlement area. This is where the county is targeting industrial growth or major economic development projects. So it's just, honestly, it's just colors for the sake of highlighting the settlement area. The other proposed area is the Route 3 and 301 settlement area. So again, the pink area is just what's in that settlement area for those parcels. The Dahlgren settlement area. And then the proposed areas are additional parcels. This is the Claydale and ET properties. This is a property that the county has been marketing for major economic development projects for over at least 2 decades. Then the proposed second business park parcels, 3394 and 3395. The county owns the bus garage property here, right at the top. And the reason why these properties here are in this area, not just a settlement area, is because maybe in the future, these properties won't be considered in a settlement area. So we have to target them specifically in the ordinance unless the county rewrites the Claydale settlement area, which includes Claydale subdivision and only a portion of this potential property. And the same thing applies for these 2 parcels. These are not in the 3 and 301 settlement area. So just to include them, so if there is a project that lands on here and the settlement area is not extended during the next comprehensive plan, that we can still work with them on bringing a project here. So the targeted qualified industries for technology zones, the research, design, and development and manufacture of biotech, computer software, computer hardware, unmanned systems, autonomous, artificial intelligence, electric vehicles, and alternative energy. For defense production zone, this is when it just comes down to a definition because that sector can be broadly defined, but a business engaged in the design, development, or production of materials, components, or equipment required to meet the needs of national defense, or a business that is providing services in support of national defense, including but not limited to logistics. I'm happy to take any questions from the board.
Thank you, Mr. Minor. I'm going to start. So just to make sure, you gave on the first couple of slides the eligibility requirements. So this is just eligibility. You meet these requirements, you don't automatically receive any in the incentives. It just means you're eligible to receive the incentives and it would come to the board. Just want to make sure that's
correct. This is discretionary, means it's at the board's discretion.
Yes. So I make sure that people understand that it's not just handed out to anyone. So, you know, obviously this is a tool in order to attract new businesses that might not be willing to come here. But if there's some incentives, it might bring them in and it's to the benefit of our county because it will generate tax revenue. Even if it isn't the full amount, that amount's better than none.
Right.
And it's making that decision, is this a wise decision to move forward on a property necessarily for that business or not? So just try to make sure that idea is captured. So not that you didn't, but just I guess really pound that point home. So
thank you, Chair.
Did anyone have any other questions or comments that they would like to bring up for Mr. Minor? Ms. Bender?
I got a couple of questions. Alternative energy, that needs to be fleshed out a little bit more. What's the definition? Like, that's very broad.
Yes, ma'am. And the industries are broad for a reason. The ordinance is going to be in place for a long time. So alternative energy can honestly be whatever the alternative to coal, alternative to solar, alternative to nuclear, alternative to honestly anything that may be in the future. But as an example, what I provided was turbines, biofuels, and fuel cells, photovoltaic. I'm pretty sure I just butchered that word. And I think I also included, I already said that. Yep, fuel cells and photovoltaic. So photovoltaic meaning the development, research, or manufacture of solar panels. Fuel cells could be anything from hydrogen production to whatever energy could be created within a fuel cell. Biofuels could be the landfill gas in the future, and turbines obviously are. I don't think we'll ever have a wind turbine development project, but what we could have is a wind turbine component manufacturer or a wind turbine, motor manufacturer or something in that vein. So that's why you sort of leave it open for that reason.
Okay, and then the settlement area that's in Shiloh, not, and I understand the Claydale property, but the one that has Edge Hill in it, I guess.
Yes, ma'am.
Where is that exactly? Is that near?
Think about it from this perspective, ma'am. So this is about where Ralph Bunch is,
Mm-hmm.
and going down to 205. So this property here, I think this includes the Northern Neck transport property, and then comes down. And I think what the Planning Commission was considering at the top here, these parcels here are zoned commercial. These are those blighted buildings off of 301. Just after you get past, I believe the equipment. I'm about to butcher the name of this company.
Gateway?
Gateway, yes, Gateway Equipment Company.
So that goes down towards the motels in that?
So yeah, I believe it covers that.
So it starts, I'm just trying to get my bearings here. So it starts down near CVS, am I correct?
Yeah, well, this is the bus garage property right here.
Okay.
And then across the street, you have Fowler Hauling. You have a couple commercial and industrial properties. And then on the corner here is your 7-Eleven. And then here is about Walker Sand and Stone. So these are all approximate. Using the settlement areas just makes it easy for us because these are designated development areas for the county.
Okay, I just wanted to, because there's no real key, that might be helpful, especially on this one and the one near the landfill, because they have 3 different colors. Because you have the yellow too.
Right, yeah, this is off the GIS system. It's just helping us sort of identify the settlement areas. I don't know if the colors have a specific meaning behind them, but I agree with you.
And then my concern from earlier, and I just wanted to clarify, it came from slide 14. And it says, if there are no changes or additional items to consider, the board can move to advertise the ordinance. That's where I was maybe that slide was put there from a previous one, but that's where my concern was.
Yeah, understood. I mean, again, this is a presentation. The next time I come back, whether that's July or the August meeting, we will have a draft ordinance for the board to review. I'll probably have just a board report. If there does need to be a presentation, I'm more than happy to provide one. But we will have a full fleshed out ordinance for the board to review. And again, if you have any changes or if you'd like to make any additional items to what I've just presented here, or if you'd like to wait to see that full fleshed out ordinance, I'm more than happy to make any changes after what I presented here tonight.
All right, thank you very much.
But that would just be the draft. It wouldn't even necessarily be the advertised public hearing, because then everyone have an opportunity to weigh in, and then we'd have the public hearing we'd advertise. Okay. I'm sorry. Did anyone else have any other questions for Mr. Minor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Minor, for your presentation and clearing up some of the confusion from earlier. I would like to see a draft ordinance brought back to the board so that the public, it gets published in the packet ahead of time in the packet so the public can see it. So when they see it in that meeting, they can come out and provide public comment, and then the board will consider it and then consider moving forward with publishing the actual ordinance for a public hearing for adoption. Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions? Okay, I think we do have agreement, though, that we would like to see you bring back a draft ordinance for us to entertain.
Yes, sir.
Either July or August.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Minor. All right, move on to action items. And Ms. Lackey, the MOU with Ralph Bunch.
So I think you all will recall that the board approved a letter of intent with the Ralph Bunch Alumni Association mid-November of last year, which expressed the intent to move forward with negotiation of the mutual undertakings of the county and the Alumni Association, and to better reflect those mutual undertakings with an additional agreement or MOU, a memorandum of understanding within 1 year. So I worked with the Alumni Association to prepare a draft MOU that outlines what those roles and responsibilities are with regard to the contemplated museum. That museum is proposed to be situated in what a working title of the community center of the whole revitalization of the site is the working title is the Ralph Bunche Visualize and Rise Center. Obviously, the naming rights would be subject to further negotiation of a separate MOU or other legal instrument with the Visualize and Rise Foundation. But this kind of sets the groundwork. So if there is interest in moving forward with a website or other campaigns, again, subject to confirmation with the Visualize and Rise Foundation of their interest in the site, this would be a parallel path to going ahead and setting forward what the fundraising goal is for the Alumni Association with regard to the furnishing and build out of the museum component of that contemplated community center.
Thank you, Ms. Lackey. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Okay.
I'll move adoption of the proposed memorandum of understanding with the Ralph Bunche Alumni Association as presented.
Second.
We have a motion properly seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Lackey. Department of Economic Development, Mr. Minor.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I'm here to provide a report for the King George Professional Firefighters and Paramedics Local 4438. Proposed to begin an annual barbecue contest on Saturday, September 2nd, 2023. That will become a local and annual Labor Day event. This event will provide a family-friendly activity close to home on a holiday weekend that is enjoyable for all age groups. This event will include local vendors, local food trucks, live entertainment, activities, and attractions for families and kids of all ages to enjoy and some very tempting barbecue. The target markets for King George Northern Neck. The target markets are King George, Northern Neck, Fredericksburg, Southern Maryland, Richmond, Virginia, and Northern Virginia. This event will rely on digital and audio advertising. Advertising will begin on the end of May with a save the date post to Facebook, followed by an event page and continue through the date of the event. Radio stations, flyers, banners, and social media will be utilized. Utilizing all three styles of advertising will increase their reach and potentially attendance. They will actively be seeking sponsors to cover the cost of family-friendly activities, music, and door prizes. Sealson Sports Complex provides ample room for contestants, vendors, and guests to spread out with plenty of parking. Contestants would be able to park on September the 1st and set up for the contest the following day, September 2nd, when festival opens to public from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Swag and marketing items to promote King George and the festival will include Visit King George and its logo. Items being considered are koozies, wine and bottle openers, and lanyards. The annual Northern Neck Smoke Eaters Barbecue Battle is requesting $20,000. TAC and staff recommended funding for the following: tents, chairs, tables, bathrooms, wash stations, and dumpster, $3,500. Stage, $900. Advertisement, $8,000. Swag and marketing, $3,000, with a total of $15,400. Happy to take any questions, and I believe the local chapter is here this evening if you have any questions for them directly.
Does any have any questions or comments upon the request for the Northern Neck Smoke Eaters Barbecue Battle? Spender.
I just have a quick question. I know there's several requests in here. What is our budget? Has that reset?
So and I thank you for asking that, Ms. Bender. So this will come out of our new fiscal year, which I believe is advertised for $157,000. The grant money for the TAC fund will remain the same at approximately $68,000 a year. So this will be the first hit to that for the fiscal year.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So what is, and if we need the representatives to answer the question, what is the goal for any revenue generated for the event?
I'll have them answer that question, ma'am.
It goes to lots of things. It goes into our general fund, which we put back into our membership for mental health. If any of our membership has any hardships, we can give it back to them. We also, not as a nonprofit, but as just something we would like to do for the community. We do like an adopt a family for Christmas time. We get them gifts, kids gifts in the time around Christmas. And lots of other things that we just try to give as a benefit to our membership.
And one more follow-up question. Your members, are they exclusively members of King George Fire Rescue and Emergency Services Department and or the volunteers?
It's exclusively the career side.
Okay.
It's a voluntary thing that you sign up for. You can leave whenever you want, but we try to encourage it with our new members that come in.
But it's all King George.
Correct.
Firefighters, et cetera, that benefit
So this goes
from the revenue, not Spotsylvania County firefighters, not Stafford County. So we're keeping the money in the county, right?
Yes.
Is my point.
How it works is there's tiers to it, but this would stay within our local 4438 group, which is King George.
Thank you. With that, Mr. Chair, before we get on to the overall request, I wonder if my colleagues would entertain waiving the $500 fee for the use of Sealston Sports Complex. It's one of the items listed as an expenditure. I'm assuming that's based on the schedule of fees from Parks and Recreation.
I think there's a majority that would agree with that.
So can we make sure that gets relayed to them and I guess Mr. Miller gets relayed? Is there any legal issue with doing that, Ms. Lackey?
I'm going to put Assistant County Attorney Jessica Washington on the spot for just a second. She most recently reviewed the Parks and Rec rules. Is there anything you can think of offhand, Jessica, about waiver of fees? And if not, as I said, I'm putting her on the spot, so we could also come back.
And then
to
if
this
not,
issue at the next
just if there is an issue, just let us know, subject to approval by the county attorney type of deal.
Right. So the question was if there were any perceived issues with waiving the fee for use of the Sealston Sportsplex for this event.
Not that I can. Oh, is this on? Yeah. Not that I can think of, but I can look into that.
Thank you very much.
We'll confirm for you all.
Thank you. And thank you all for your consideration on that.
Mr. Collins?
Just for the Firefighters Association. So you all will have a liability insurance for that event?
We don't yet, but that's certainly something that we could look into getting, and certainly not opposed to getting.
Okay. Any other questions, comments?
Mr. Chair, comment. Yep.
Yes,
If you may, I would refer you possibly to the King George Fall Festival Committee, because they do a one-day event on county property that they do obtain a one-day insurance policy for, or one that covers all of the events associated with the Fall Festival. So I can put you in touch with someone there that may be able to provide you an insurance company willing to give you a quote. Thank you.
Quick question on that, because that's a really good point, because I don't want the county to be liable if something did happen. Is could we, if we vote on this, make a contingent on to making sure they have a liability policy in place?
I would anticipate that that's part of the rental terms, but again, I can't say with 100% certainty. So that's something that could be a contingency that the board includes as a precaution.
The King George Fall Festival application, $1,700 for their liability insurance for the day.
Thank you, Mr. Collins, Ms. Binder, Ms. Kupka for that information. Do we have any other questions or comments about this request? Then I will entertain a motion if anyone would like to make one.
I'll make a motion to recommend the staff recommendation of funding the, first annual Northern Neck Smoke Eaters Barbecue Battle at $15,400, but I will put in with contingency that they have liability insurance.
Second.
We have a motion properly seconded. Do we have any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Can I just make a friendly amendment? What it shows 15,050. Did you say 40 or 50?
15,400. I was reading the bottom TAC recommendation.
Okay. I'm good.
Aye.
And I'm
Discussion.
We're in the middle of the vote. So
I am in favor. Yes, aye.
Aye. Okay. Chair votes aye. Motion carries. I will circle back. Mr. Collins, did you have something you wanted to bring up about it?
It's a little late now. I was going to say that for the fall festival, we're paying they're getting $1,700 for the liability insurance. I was actually going to add to that $1,000 to that amount for them to have insurance.
You could always make another motion in regards to something very particular if you wanted to. And if you would like to, I will leave it to you. I'll give you a moment to decide if you want to do that.
I would like to make a motion. Let me get back to the original page. You can't see that. I'd like to make a motion to make a motion to add $1,000 from the TAC advisory funds with the Professional Firefighters Association number 4438 for the purpose of obtaining liability insurance for their event.
Friendly amendment in the amount of 1,000 up to, including $1,000.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion properly seconded to increase the funding by 1,000 from what we already approved. Okay, any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye, motion carries. Thank you. All right, Mr. Minor, I think you have another one for us.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The King George County Fall Festival celebrates its 64th year in 2023. The Fall Festival includes a parade through King George downtown, a craft and vendor show, food fair, pageant, car show, and a 5K 1-mile sanctioned race on the Doggin Railroad Heritage Trail. Games and rides are provided free of charge to the public. The King George Fall Festival supports tourism by bringing people into the community. The increase in sales in local businesses, especially those near the high school, craft vendors, as well as families from out of town and stays in hotels. The KG Fall Festival Committee is made up of volunteers from various nonprofit organizations in King George, as well as local businesses. This includes, but is not limited to, King George Royaltons, Dogger's Lions Club, King George High School DECA, KG Optimus, and KG Volunteer Fire and Rescue. The total request is $19,050. TAC recommended full approval at $19,050. Staff's recommendation is $15,050.
All right, does anyone have any questions for Mr. Minor about the Fall Festival request? Okay. Entertain a motion if anyone would like to make one.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the Board of Supervisors funding for the Fall Festival in the amount of $16,050 from the TAC Advisory Fund. That's 1,000 more than recommended.
I'll second it.
We have a motion properly seconded. Is there any discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Is there any specificity with which that $1,000 may be spent? Because there are certain categories of expenses that staff declined to recommend funding for.
If you'd like to itemize them, 500 for the tent tables and chairs and 500 for program expenses.
That'll work for me.
Okay, so that would be an amendment to put 500 to tents, tables, and chairs and 500 to program expenses based off the motion. So we have a motion that was properly seconded. Oh, okay. So yes, that would be
Could I do a friendly amendment then to specify that the funds be divided $500 for tent tables and chairs and $500 for program expenses?
Yes, ma'am.
So we have that motion, and then do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion properly seconded. So it's going to be $16,050 with the addition of 500 to tents, tables, and chairs and 500 to program expenses. Do we have any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Minor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Department of Finance. Appropriation of the fiscal year 2023-2024 King George County operating budget. Ms. Hahn.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. In your packet tonight was the resolution for the acceptance appropriation of the King George County fiscal year 2023-2024 budget. In that resolution, you'll see that this is what was advertised for the public hearing that was held at the last meeting, for total revenues of $115,383,854, and the total expenditures also $115,383,854. And with that, I recommend that the board adopt the resolution as presented.
Do we have any comments or questions about the King George County operating budget? Okay.
I move adoption of the resolution to appropriate designated funds and accounts for the fiscal year 2023-2024 operating budget of King George as presented.
Second. We have a motion properly seconded. Do we have any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Hahn. Adoption of the proposed tax rates and PPTRA for calendar year 2023.
Yes. So the King George County Board of Supervisors held a public hearing on Tuesday, June 6, 2023, regarding the proposed tax rates for calendar year 2023. Based on the recommendations made by the Board of Supervisors at the budget work session on May 11, 2023, the proposed tax rates for calendar year 2023 are as follows. Real estate and mobile home tax, each at 68 cents per 100 of assessed value. Personal property tax, $3.25 per 100 of assessed value. Machinery and tools tax, $2.50 per 100 of assessed value. And to set the PPTRA, Personal Property Tax Relief Act, for calendar year 2023 to remain the same as calendar year 2022 at a rate of 24%. So with that, I ask that the board adopt the proposed tax rates for calendar year 2023 and set the PPTRA as presented.
All right. Do we have any comments or questions from Ms. Hahn about the tax rate and the PPTRA? Okay.
I move adoption of the proposed tax rates for calendar year 2023 and set the PPTRA as presented.
Second.
We have a motion properly seconded. Do we have any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Hahn. Move on to appropriations by major classification, the proposed 2023-2024 King George County School operating budget. Ms. Hahn again.
So during the budget work sessions, the finalized budget for the King George County Schools was for fiscal year 2023, 2024 operating budget by major classification, which the board needs to appropriate by major classification. Instruction for $44,414,250. Administration, $2,376,470. Transportation, $4,378,965. Operations and maintenance, $5,204,207. Facilities, $405,353, and technology, $2,541,852. So with that, I recommend appropriation of the King George County Schools fiscal year 2023, 2024 operating budget by major classification in the total amount of $59,321,097.
Does anyone have any questions or comments from Ms. Hahn about the schools fiscal year 2023, 2024 operating budget? Okay.
I move appropriation of the King George County Schools fiscal year 2023, 2024 operating budget by major classification in the total amount of $59,321,097 across the following categories. Instruction, $44,414,250. Administration, $2,376,470. Transportation, $4,378,965. Operations maintenance, $5,204,207. Facilities, $405,353. Technology, $2,541,852 as presented.
Second.
We have a motion probably seconded. Do we have any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Chair votes aye, motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Hahn. All right, we have King George County Schools, reappropriation of King George County Schools funds. Ms. Sherry Williams.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the board. I'm Sherry Williams, Finance Manager for Schools, presenting for Dr. Boyd, who could not be present tonight. King George County Schools desire to reappropriate $928,373,000 from the instruction and administration categories to the categories listed above for year-end reconciliation. To reconcile the budget for Fund 250 for the King George County Schools general operating budgets. Transfers are completed to ensure that no expenditure category is overspent prior to the final annual audit and completion of the annual comprehensive financial report. We recommend that the Board of Supervisors by motion approve the King George County Schools request to reappropriate $928,373 from instruction, administration, from the instruction and administration to the instruction categories of administration, transportation, facilities, and operations management as identified in the attachments. Any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Does anyone have any questions? Okay.
I move to reappropriate $928,373 from the instruction category 61100, 61210, and administration 62120 to the instruction category 61230, administration 62110, transportation 63400, facilities 66200, 67100, and operation maintenance 64200 as identified in the attached documents as presented in the packet.
Second.
We have a motion properly seconded. Do we have any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Williams.
Thank you.
Okay. I think that was the last of our action items. So we'll move on to the County Administrator's Report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It was pointed out to me, and I did receive a memo on it. The Commonwealth Attorney, the Treasurer's Office, and the Revenue Commissioners all plan to be off and closed on the 3rd of July, which would be that Monday before 4th of July. So then we will put something on the website about that. But, and I do believe that the governor is the governor acting on that about statewide. I was told that might be a possibility. So if the governor acts, then the rest of the county would have to follow suit. I'm just letting you guys know that. So let's do a couple of things here. Let's do the easy ones. Zoning ordinance update open house. If you're interested, the Community Development Department will be having one at 6 p.m., which is on next Tuesday night. Opportunity to go through some of the things that are in the zoning overhaul. Oh, that's July. I'm sorry. Okay, well, get that on your calendar way early then. Reminder, you have a meeting on July 11th. It's the only one scheduled for July, unless you hold a special meeting. And as you can see on the very bottom, there is a proposal to do a proposed joint session with the Planning Commission on the 12th of July, which would be a Wednesday, at 6 p.m. in the boardroom. And the purpose of this is we've been asked by Dominion Power to have some kind of a briefing, some kind of a work session. They want to discuss the topic of energy infrastructure to support data centers. They are doing the reason they feel that you need to know this is to understand their process of review for projects like that. And you know what the county's role obviously is, but there's something called a 2232 review, which Ms. Lackey could probably tell you a little bit more. But essentially, they have a process that they go through, and they want you to know. And obviously, it's no secret that the Birchwood rezoning application is they are looking to try to be before the Planning Commission in July, and then they would probably be moving to come see this board at some point thereafter. So the people at Dominion wanted to have a meeting where they could explain their process. It's not meant to be an extremely long meeting, but they do have a process that they go through, and it's I think it's kind of a good public service type of approach that they're looking at. Can I advance that? Can we advance that to the to-do list? So there's your to-do list, dealing with CIP projects, the old middle school, and the King George County Courthouse Use Study. We're going to have to update that because it looks like we'll be getting something to you all on the 11th. We have had conversations with Mosley, and they will have some presentation that they'll want to do on the 11th of July at that meeting. The Ralph Bunch roof project obviously is it's completed. The closeout has been done. Fuel depot is the engineering staff is working with the fire chief, and they're preparing the bid documents for the installation of a fuel depot at Company 1. I am happy to report, and I can have some pictures forwarded to you all, but Mr. Clark has reported that the tennis courts, the resurfacing of the tennis courts is complete, and he was able to get some pictures, and I'll make sure that they're forwarded that to you. Courthouse, obviously you had an update at the last meeting, the new courthouse. If you haven't, like I said, go down there and get a look at what's going on. One of the big milestones that's going to be coming up fairly soon, not in, like in the next month or so, but is what Mr. Cusenberry calls the topping off ceremony, where they actually enclose the facility, and then it's my understanding they want to have some kind of a celebration that you all would be invited to, just kind of like the groundbreaking. And it'll be something that's probably in the next several months, but be on the lookout for that. The couple of service authority items, ARPA, the ARPA water grant. So we are executing that. That involves a number of upgrades to wells and the various systems that the county has to come into compliance for the future for the VDH folks. And then you have the ARPA wastewater grant, which is a DEQ funded grant, and that is dealing with wastewater matters. And that is one that we have a $16 million and is going to be a significant impact to the county's service authority. Decommissioning of the Dahlgren sludge pond. If you may have been following some of the service authority, there was a kind of a residual sludge pond that dated back to like the 90s. And it was off in the woods and it was out of service, but it was something that DEQ was very concerned about. And so we were able to get a contractor in there and do that project. And what is nice, and I happily reported this to the Service Authority Board tonight, we had in conjunction with our staff and the contractor, they were able to save $12,000 for the Service Authority. So I think that's something that's worth noting. Circle and Canterbury well systems interconnections. These are all part of the overall plan to have redundancy throughout the entire county. And if you know where obviously Canterbury is and you know where the Circle systems, they are not connected right now. And the goal is to have them connected so that you would have redundancy throughout the system. Arnold's Corner well upgrades, that's over by the Sheets on Route 3. And that work is in the process of getting prepared for bid documents. And so that will be another important project that gets done for the Service Authority. Perkins Corner wastewater plant decommissioning. The engineering work is proceeding, and there's a preliminary engineering report that has been submitted. It's RK&K is doing that project, but that is a crucial project, obviously, for the future of the Service Authority. There's also a plan to decommission the Oakland Park wastewater plant. And then, as I think I've reported in the previous meetings, there would be interconnections of water ultimately to Hop Yard water lines that would run to Hop Yard from both plants, and sewer that would go, because once you open it up, it's best to do the work at the same time. So I will say this, and I do appreciate the comments about the packets, and we will do a better job. I know that in the case of Mr. Minor, I know he didn't obviously intend to keep anything from anybody, that it was just a matter of, I think he was fine tuning his presentation. And I think, as we indicated, if it was a presentation and we hear you loud and clear, we'll make sure that you get these documents at the time that we put the entire packet together. We really do stress in my office that, folks get stuff to us so that we can get it on the agenda. And there are times that things unfortunately do happen, and I apologize. It's my responsibility, and we'll do better next time. I will say this also, and it was asked about the work sessions. So up until May of this year, there were never written minutes of work sessions. It's never been the standard procedure. It's a work session. And obviously you're covered under the YouTube presentation, or broadcast that. But one of the things that we looked at is to try to keep a better record for you of those meetings, because there's sometimes things that are multiple directions are being flown out during the budget session. And I think Ms. Hahn and myself, try to funnel as much information as we can into a direction. And so we felt that, look, let's just keep minutes so that we can have some of that. They're not official, but we will turn them over to people who asked for them. There wasn't any reluctance to do that. It's just that anything prior to May, really, there were no written documents of budget work sessions, but we are doing that. My staff is doing a great job. Ms. Fish and Ms. Courtney with Cheyenne, and so, but we're happy to provide that information. So I appreciate all the input. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Did anyone have any questions for Mr. Miller?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, Mr. Collins.
So if I ask for the minutes for the work sessions, do I got to pay for it? Me?
Ms. Collins, that would be something that I would think that you as a board member would get that. You know, in the case of your having to do a FOIA request, I do believe that I did take that to the board, and the board's decision was what the board's decision wasn't something that.
Nothing to do with that.
Okay.
I'm asking, if I ask for the work session minutes, do I need to pay for them?
If you were to submit an official FOIA request with Ms. Fish and it were to take more than 30 minutes, in that case, yes, you would, because that's the process. You submitted an official FOIA request. You don't submit an official FOIA request and you ask as a board member for those minutes, I'm sure that Mr. Miller can make sure those are provided to you.
You must be misunderstanding what I'm saying. So the minutes in the packet are available to me and anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
The minutes for the special meetings, I'm asking to have those minutes. They're already produced. I don't have to go anywhere else to produce them. Do I have to pay for them? That has nothing to do with FOIA. Haven't got that far yet.
If I may, Chairman Granger, Jackie, could you just nod your head? I believe those minutes are posted to the website, are they not? The budget work session?
They haven't been posted to the website. They're unofficial transcripts. We do have them on hand, and I can forward them all to you tonight.
Could you send them to me, please?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
And we will also provide it to all of the board members as well.
Next question is, for Mr. Miller, is I see stakes going down Route 3 in the center and over. Is that for the Perkins Corner wastewater plant going to Hop Yard? The stakes that are all down Route 3 in the median?
I would have to check with Mr. Young. He's coordinating that project, but I know there's work that they're doing initially on the route for that decommissioning. Yes, it involves looking at that route to take it to Hop Yard, because that's the plan. So I can get you specific information back.
The question is, are the stakes in the middle of the median, is that the route they want to take for this pipeline?
That's something I would have to get right back to you on.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any other questions for Mr. Miller? Okay, then I think we do have a closed session we have added to our meeting.
Motion. I move the King George County Board of Supervisors convened in closed session for 1, discussion of Cigarette Crossing litigation pursuant to State Code Section 2.2-311A7 for consultation or briefing with legal counsel regarding actual litigation, and State Code Section 2.2-3711A8 for consultation with legal counsel regarding specific legal matters, and 2, discussion and consideration of personnel matters relating to the performance and appointment of the county administrator pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A1. I invite the county administrator, the county attorney as needed, because they are deemed necessary and their presence will reasonably aid the board in consideration of one or more of the topics to be discussed pursuant to Virginia Code 2.2-3712F.
Second.
We have a motion properly seconded. Do we have any discussion? I would just ask, I see the initial motion included our assistant county attorney, Ms. Washington, as well. Do we want to make an amendment to include Ms. Washington in our closed session?
Make an amendment to include Ms. Washington. I'm sorry I left you out.
Okay. So there's an
I'll
amendment.
say second again.
Okay. We have a motion probably seconded to amend to include Ms. Washington as part of our closed session. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We are in closed session. Do you have your email open, Ms. Bender? I don't have a copy. I gave it to Mr. Collins, but we have an Ms. Kupka, would you just read it?
I move that the King George County Board of Supervisors return to public meeting and certify by vote that only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements by Virginia law and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered during the closed meeting.
Second.
A motion properly seconded. We will vote by roll call. Ms. Bender?
So certify.
Mr. Collins?
So certified.
Mrs. Kupka?
So certify.
Mr. Stonehill?
So certify.
Chair so certifies we are back in open session. Do we have any other business to bring before the board tonight? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
All right, I will make a motion to adjourn till July 11th at 6:30 p.m. here in the boardroom.
Second.
We have a motion properly seconded. Do we have any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We're adjourned.